grow up with the NES, PlayStation, Star Wars, cartoons, and 80s TV? Do you like to think who would win in a fight between Batman and the Master Chief? Comics, games, movies, music, and TV, they're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. Comics, games, movies, music, and TV, they're gonna tell you everything you need. Superheroes or not, they got your back. They're gonna save the world of geeks. This Week in Geek. This Week in Geek.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Loose Cannon. It's been a little bit, but we are back. This is actually something we wanted to record for the last couple of weeks, but we were really busy at This Week in Geek doing all of our E3 gaming coverage, and I wanted to personally take a break. So this is another episode with Alex and Aaron, and Birdman is still away. He'll probably be off the next one or two episodes, depending on how it goes with him getting another procedure done and recovery time and whatnot. But I know he wants to be back by mid-July, I think is his personal goal. So we had sort of decided, we're going to do some episodes on our own. And how have you been, Aaron?
I've been okay. It's actually been kind of a busy busy couple months. Let's put it that way.
I saw that you're back to doing reenactment stuff.
Yeah. So the past weekend I was back down in my hometown with a reenactment event that was actually taking place there. So it was kind of neat being back in the hometown and seeing people that I knew. But yeah, it was actually a lot of fun. It was just my wife and I, and we were able to just chit chat between people coming in and asking questions to us.
So was this more of a performance thing for random? Like, this wasn't like just a reenactment thing with a big reenactment troupe. Was this for the public more so than?
Yeah. The ones that we enjoy going to are actually ones where the public is there and asking questions.
So the kind of thing that like people would take like school trips to see, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a living history thing. And my wife and I will talk to the public. We'll have people ask us questions. Obviously, they're always drawn to like the guns and whatnot, but we'll start talking about the history, the culture, what it meant to be in the Red Army or the Red Air Force. The talk about the Holocaust. We do that, but yeah, we enjoy doing it. We enjoy doing it. There are sometimes like weapons demonstrations, but when it's just my wife and I, we're not going out there and running around and firing things.
So what was the theme? You used to do, what is it? A lot of, it's like Russian World War II stuff?
Yeah, we do Soviet. That's all we do is Soviet World War II. Mainly because most people just don't know anything about it or only know myths.
It's like they know America and then they know Germany and that's it.
Yeah, and if you're Canadian, obviously you know the Canadian contribution to the
Canadian
forces.
or the British. Yeah, we'll know that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, in the States, so that is, and yet like up here we do learn a fair bit more, not like in detail that you would know of Russia, but we do get taught a little bit more of that front. And then they usually touch very briefly upon like Italy and Africa sort of stuff, but very like a lot of it is just like, hey, did you know that there was another war front in Africa with the Italian army?
Yeah, and most people just haven't heard anything besides maybe Stalingrad, the Battle of Stalingrad, or maybe the Battle of Kursk, and usually it's just misinformation. Like half the Russians went in with only rifles and half went in with ammo, and they picked up whoever was killed first, their equipment. That's not the case.
Basically what you know, and most people know, or think they know, they learn from Enemy at the Gates, the movie.
Yeah, and it's a shame too, because there's like nuggets of truth in that movie, but it's 95% complete crap.
Yeah.
There really was like a sniper named Vasily Zaitsev. He really was in Stalingrad, and he really was a pretty important dude. But there was no sniper battle. There was, all the stuff that's really shown that the Red Army's doing there.
It
Is
made
just,
for a good movie, though. At least.
yeah. It's I have no doubt. Yeah, it is an interesting movie. It is entertaining, but it's don't take it for historical fact by any means.
So basically, Saving Private Ryan, it is not like when trying to show what happened.
Yeah,
to
no,
beaches.
it definitely is not. There aren't very many good films that show the Soviet experience in the war, and those that are often filmed in Russian, and they're not very approachable unless you speak the language. I mean, I've seen some. One is just called Stalingrad, and it's kind of artsy, but it's really well done. Yeah, it's tough to find stuff. So generally, you just have to read books, and now and then find a person on YouTube that has actually done a pretty good job putting together a mini documentary.
Now, this, from what I saw picture-wise, was this not more about Korea than World War II this time?
It was the focus this year was on Korea, but since we're in such a minority of being Soviet reenactors, they like having us there mainly because we talk about things that most people don't talk about, and that at least with the Korean conflict, a lot of the stuff that was being dumped into the Northern Korean forces were Soviet surplus from World War II. So
okay.
we can kind of talk about a lot of that, like T-34, 85 tanks, Mosin Nagant rifles, things like that. And yeah, we can talk at length about that sort of stuff.
Because here, I believe that Korea was the last official war that Canada was in, where it wasn't like everything since we've been like we were either volunteers that went over to Vietnam or we're considered peacekeepers in quotes, right?
Yeah.
Like that was I know that my cousins have grandparents on the one side of their family that are older, and like their grandfather fought in Korea, and he was from that generation where that's all he could talk about. But but growing up, like it's not really a war that we learn in school at all, except to know that it's the last time we went to we were actually declared war and went. That's really the last thing that we never really learned anything else other than it was like, oh, it was this fight over there for this reason, and there's the line drawn. You got South Korea now that is basically still occupied by the Americans in some form, and then you've got the North, which is a third world starving country that also has nukes.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff that I learned about Korea actually came from my grandparents who had been in World War II but hadn't served in Korea, and it's just because some of their buddies stayed in and passed along information that way. So I mean, I probably encountered more information about it as a kid than a lot of people did. But
yeah, it seems like the forgotten one. Everybody talks about Vietnam and everybody talks about World War II.
Yeah, and Korea just was a very brief conflict where, nothing much happened.
With very big lasting effects when it comes to, the world.
Well, it seemed like the actual fighting, I shouldn't say that nothing much happened. A lot happened, but it seemingly had no impact on what the whole point of it was about. Like, there was no conclusion to it. It just kind of was fought and then stopped because of the armistice. But nothing was really solved in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and especially now when it's like they're in a state where China is an ally, but not really. China isn't it's like China is an ally, but not really, because China values money more than anything now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always like the eye on Korea, like what are they going to do, and they're, even after whatever is going to happen to them in the future, if their regime still goes on or it changes, there's going to be entire studies done on just the psychological effect of them basically being isolated for the last nearly 60 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, so it sounds like fun. You can finally go out and there's people actually, you know, you feel safer now going out in the States if you're vaccinated?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting here in the States. I mean, there's still COVID popping up of different, different kinds of
Yeah,
the different variants.
yeah,
But yeah, we wear masks still when we're in a crowd or in a public space, but at least with this reenacting event, it was more along the lines of being outside,
yeah.
and there's a nice breeze, so I don't feel as bad actually, um,
Doing all
not
that,
having
yeah,
to wear a mask.
yeah. There's enough people vaccinated now that you don't feel quite as nervous about doing stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah, not at all.
Well, cool. I mean, I am glad to hear like whenever you're doing stuff like this, especially if it's new. And then that also brings up like it's got to get like the acting bug going, the creative bug going, because it's like sure you're reenacting a lot of the same things, but uh, you work in academia, so it must be fun just being able to when you see kids and stuff, educate them on things they might not have been interested in
Yeah,
beforehand.
yeah, and sometimes well, I shouldn't say sometimes. Most of the time, kids really don't care when they're like less than teenagers. Let's say they're just like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm here because dad's interested in it.
yeah,
Or you'll have like a boy that's generally interested, but just because of the guns and things.
yeah. They're interested in the concept of, oh my god, there's guns.
Yeah, and what my wife and I try to do with those kids is like, no, 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 hold on. You're looking at this in the wrong way. This isn't about the guns. This isn't about the fighting. It's about the reasons why people fought, because you're passionate about something, right? And you have to
Yeah,
try to explain it in those terms. Or when we see somebody's daughter who's there who's just like, I could care less. This has nothing to do with me. And we say, well, women fought right alongside men in the Soviet army.
yeah.
They held every position that a man did, and it was their war too. And
Like 30, 40 years before that was a thing in the West.
yeah, and I mean, it stopped after the war. They backslid
Yeah,
afterwards, and Stalin tried to hide the women's contribution to actual fighting. Even the first Victory Day parade that happened in 1945, Stalin dictated that no women were to be a part of the parade, and it was just all men. And it's kind of shocking when you see that, because I mean, this is 1945. These are guys coming right back from Germany, and there's no women there.
not to mention like that's the age where cameras were everywhere. People knew it happened.
Oh yeah.
I thought you were going to say that the best part of it is like getting to make food, like your sausages and everything.
Well, I try to do all my baking beforehand, so I'll bring like cookies and sweets and traditional kind of cakes and things to the event. At this one, I didn't cook at, just because it was only Darlene and I.
No doctor
And
sausage.
I had doctor sausage, but I had already made it beforehand. Um, but yeah, if it's just Darlene and I'm not going to really cook there at the event. When it's more than us, I'll do it, and it depends. Like if there's another person in our unit that's there, she generally likes to cook. So you know what? That's for her. That's fine. I'll continue to make bread and cookies and little cakes and sweets. That's
Yeah,
fine. I'm happy to do that.
cool. So yeah, now that we're sort of caught up, I think everybody knows that I've been doing all the E3 coverage. That's been consuming my last week and a half. You're back to reenactment. You made me watch a couple weird movies.
Yeah, see, I recommended both of these because they both had night in them,
Yeah.
and like I've seen both of them multiple times. One I have more of a history with, but yeah.
Well, first things first. I watched Night of the Comet.
Okay, Night of the Comet, 1984.
Yes. That has one of the weirdest vibes I've ever seen from a movie. But so is this something that you've been a fan of like a long time?
Okay,
or
yeah, I have to talk about this. This is actually a story.
You go off, and then
Okay,
I
okay.
will contribute as I see it.
Okay, so back when I was a kid, obviously I had cable. I was a cable kid, so I watched reruns of everything. I watched HBO, Cinemax Show, all that stuff. And this is a movie that I obviously caught on like HBO or something like that very soon after it had been released. So I maybe saw this when I was like 8 years old for the first time, and it scarred me. This this movie I remember seeing probably in like the fall of 1985, maybe. And I remember seeing all the people that had turned to dust in the movie. And like it's kind of like this comet comes by the Earth, and everyone that's outside, all animal life that is outside and exposed to this comet when it makes a close pass to Earth, dies by turning into calcium dust, what they describe as calcium dust. And it's implied that that's what happened to the dinosaurs, but people that were inside like steel or metal or deep underground could survive. And I remember seeing those clothes, like piles of clothes covered in dust, and seeing all like the Christmas decorations that were up because it happened very close to Christmas time. And like that winter at Christmas time, somebody had dumped a whole bunch of clothes outside one of the donation boxes, and they were just laying there. And I remember seeing that and just wanting to cry. Like it's weird. I'm sorry that it hit me that way, but it made this movie stick in my mind. And I'm glad it did, because coming back to it and not watching it as like a crazy weird zombie film, because it sort of is a zombie film, it's not really watching it as a post-apocalyptic film, because it's not really that, sort of.
There's mutants in it. There's but there's also weird late 70s early 80s discotheque style music and pastel colors. And
it's like super peak 80s neon lights, leg warmer kind of stuff. And it is such a joy to watch now, just because it's the 1980s and it's very 1980s, but it has the feel of a 1950s and 60s B movie.
Yeah, the sets, like this, the whole feel of it is, I got the weird vibe of like Vincent Price Last Man on Earth. Just the look and aesthetic, although there is like multiple people in this and it's in color, but it's that weird cheaper Hollywood set feel.
Well, this was filmed for an incredibly low amount of money. And I'm trying to find it again, because I didn't have that up in front of me. I think it was filmed for around $100,000.
Wow.
In the 1980s in downtown LA. And I've probably gotten that number wrong, and I'm trying to find it as quickly as possible.
700. I just looked up 700,000.
Okay. 700,000. I'm very sorry. I was
Which
off.
is insane.
That's still incredibly low. Incredibly low.
That's less money than it costs to get like a permit for one location in LA.
and they filmed it all in LA.
So the question is, did they do it the old school style, which is film it and run every time the cops show up?
Well, okay, so I've watched all of the documentaries that came on the Blu-ray, because I have like multiple different versions of this. And supposedly what they did was they just filmed in downtown LA at daybreak, and had a couple guys on motorcycles just hold traffic up for a couple minutes, and they would do each one of these long shots.
Renegade
once.
Style.
Sort of, yeah. I want to say like halfway between true Renegade style and trying to do things semi-properly. But man, they made LA look completely abandoned, didn't they?
It like, I would have thought that it was like one of those filming Canada sort of things in place of, and then use a couple establishing shots. But you're right, the whole thing was filmed there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also like to compare this movie not just to 1950s and 60s B movies, but in a way it is 28 Days Later, as though it was Valley Girls and
apparently
peak 1984.
It's made by the same producers of Valley Girl.
Yeah. And if you will recognize the two main actresses in this, Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney, from tons of different B movies in the 1980s.
I think one of them was The Last Starfighter. I remember.
Yeah. Catherine Mary Stewart was in The Last Starfighter. Kelly Maroney, she's in other awesome movies like Chopping Mall. I don't know if you remember that one.
I think one of them was in, excuse me, and one of them was in Night Flyers too. I remember that movie.
Yes. And then obviously you have the main lead is played by Robert Robert Beltran, the guy that played Chakotay on Star Trek Voyager, and it's interesting
That,
seeing him so young in this.
that's what it was. I couldn't pinpoint it, but I didn't read the credits. But you're right.
And he's actually great in this. He really is great.
He would have been quite young. Well, I mean, probably 30s, but he looked young.
Yes. And I don't know. I really enjoy this movie. Obviously, it hurt me as a child psychologically, right? But
yeah, when you said that, hey, this was the movie that scarred me as a kid, I was thinking, oh man, it better not be what I think it was. And the movie I was thinking of was Fire in the Sky. That was terrible.
Yeah, Fire in the Sky.
I saw that when I was like 7, uncensored on TV, and I was just like, I can't sleep now for the next 2 or 3 days.
Oh yeah, Fire in the Sky was terrifying. But yeah, no. I love this film. It's
a cool, weird film. It's hard to really describe its entire. It pulls a bit from different types of movies, and sort of has a weird mix in it, and it's ends up being like, here's a group of people that are going to try to survive together. Some people slowly mutate into mutants or zombies as it goes on. Some people already are zombies, so there's some speculation that it's like that there's some sort of particles in the air that some people will turn and some people won't.
Yeah, how it worked, from because obviously I've watched this a lot. How it works was the people that were in the underground base, they left their vents open accidentally. And while all this dust is in the air, it's not what's changing people. It's like the radiation from the comet is what is doing it. And if you were outside when it came by, you're dead. And most people were. If you were inside like a regular house, you most likely got enough radiation to just turn you to dust immediately. It's if you were in enough protection but still had outside air access, and it was ventilating air through, like you couldn't easily stay inside like the basement of a building and always have been protected. Like there's the two main characters, like Kelly Maroney, she slept in a garden shed and made it through somehow. Fair enough. Catherine Mary Stewart, her character Regina, was inside this like theater's projection box that was an old school theater, and it was built like a bunker. And that worked. Robert Beltran's character was in the back of his refrigerated truck, like sleeping with a girl, and she got torn apart later by zombies. And that's enough. But obviously these people that were in this underground bunker that were prepared and had accidentally left the vents open, it wasn't enough, because they're all slowly dying. But yeah, you see all these other people that are kind of running around, and they're not really zombies. They're just slowly going insane because they're dehydrating. They're slowly turning to dust themselves. And it's causing them to lose their minds and become psychotic. So eventually all these comet zombies will just dissolve. They'll just dissolve away. And all that'll be left is everyone that was fully protected. And this movie might make more sense if you went with their original title, which was Teenage Mutant Comet Zombies. And everyone loves that title. Like everyone involved was like, "This is an awesome."
Which
title.
would have predated, I think, Turtles, the cartoon. The comic was out, I think, but
yeah.
But that was, and it was clear that they were trying to capitalize on a few different movies that have become popular and styles and things, and pull things in. I still can't believe they did it for under $1 million. It looks like it cost at least a few million back then.
Yeah, it looks way better than it has a right to be, and I think the acting is actually very good in it. Everyone involved acted fairly well. I really think that Catherine Mary Stewart and Kelly Maroney obviously stand out, while Robert Beltran, I always say Beltran, that's not how to say it, Beltran, he gets top billing. He even says in the interviews that those two ladies should have gotten top billing. They are the movie, and they do a really good job.
Well, and it made like $14 million on its $700,000 budget, which, back then, a successful horror film was like if you made like $5 million, you usually made money on it, because most horror films only cost a couple million back then to make. So it was wildly successful, a lot more than was expected. Like most movies didn't hit that $100 million thing that we're used to now.
Yeah.
So for it's PG-13, but it's borderline R. Like,
yeah.
I'm kind of surprised that it got away with some things that it did. And now it's very possible we might be watching a director's cut when we saw it, but I know the Blu-ray was released by Shout Factory. But this is one of those films that I used to see all the time at video rental stores and VHS. I actually remember seeing, I think this one was on Betamax in my local rental store too.
Yeah.
It was like one of those films that attained big cult status at the home video market back in the day.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember seeing it in my video stores, but I owned copies of this.
It scarred me so much that I must own it.
Well, it has such an amazing feel to it, the entire movie, and it's one of those things I even as a kid, even as like a teenager, I'd put in and just enjoy when I was like up late at night or something like that to have in the background. Yeah, it's hard to describe unless you've seen it, but it has a distinct visual style, a distinct feel to it, and you're right, it's pushing R. And the thing is, the Blu-ray version that I watched, I don't remember anything different than that version. Like even watching it on like HBO,
yeah.
I remember like the things that are really kind of pushing that edge, like the zombie eating the guy's leg in the beginning. Regina's boyfriend, when he goes out of the projection room and gets attacked by the zombie, he's like eating his leg later on.
Yeah, like and it's not like
That's
overly bloody in it, but it's borderline.
Yeah, it's
sure.
borderline, and that was in at least every version that I remember watching, because that wasn't like surprising to me at all.
And it has the classic, typical ending, driving off into the sunset for an unknown future sort of ending. Yeah. And I was reading that apparently this was very influential on the creation of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes, that is what even in the interviews, that's it. That comes across in the interviews. I'd love to hear like an actual interview with Joss Whedon
explaining what exactly influenced him.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess maybe the idea of, even though they didn't get top billing, the women being the heroes. Yeah,
it's probably that. The no nonsense girls that even though like Kelly Maroney's character Samantha, she's like super girly and a cheerleader, she's also like an incredible badass.
So that's probably where it comes from, because this came out I think the same year as Terminator, so good year for women in heroic roles.
Yes, I agree.
So I don't know what more we can say about this, except it is a weird movie that you're probably going to want to check out. I don't know if everybody is going to want to buy it, but it's definitely worth a rental or watch.
Yeah, I would obviously recommend it. I think it's worth watching just to see 28 Days Later as if it was in the 1980s with female leads, or
on a shoestring budget.
On a shoestring budget, or a 1950s or 60s B movie being shot in the 80s, so you have neon and awesome soundtrack.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I was going to mention, was I like the music in this.
Yeah, that's where some of the budget must have gone.
That or they might have done like just like, here, you get some exposure. We'll put you in a movie.
Yeah,
sort of situation.
Absolutely. It's not like there's a ton of really well-known songs in it, but the ones that are in it are either kind of Christmas songs or things that sound just very 80s in general, from the synth music. And yeah, anyway.
Yeah. So I would say worth it. Check it out. Then we watched something that I had always wanted to watch, probably for different reasons, because I was always a big Cronenberg fan as far as his directing goes. And you suggested we watch Nightbreed, which is, I think, the only movie where he gets third billing, like as an actual main character in a film. He's done bit parts in other directors' films, had a little cameo or two in his own films.
Yeah.
But this was always listed as one of his only starring roles, and obviously not like the lead, but as part, he's third billed, which is rare for a director who's only primarily known as a director to be given that kind of a role. And after watching this, before we get into it, I ended up having to go through a document reading just like the tumultuous history of the production of this film, because there were elements of it that I was like, the editing was weird. Things popped up that didn't make sense, or there's weird fast cuts to things like that. Somebody will get killed or die, but it's like they cut away before you see anything, but it's even a faster cut than you'd think of for like a TV show. Like there's clearly missing footage, and it turns out it's because there's clearly missing footage, because this was a film that was slashed down. They cut like an hour's worth of its content before getting final theatrical release, and what we were watching was the current best version of the restored material, but it's still missing about 20 minutes of content that was originally in the original cut. But
yeah, they had to cut out a whole bunch of stuff that would have pushed it above R, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, which means, so I guess they cut some of the deaths and some of the violence to make room for allowing more key violent spots to make it into the cut. And this is written and directed by Clive Barker, famous for the Hellraiser series and many other. Clive Barker's one of the leading horror writers, in that Stephen King always writes the same book basically, but Clive Barker's always done. I was going to use the word extreme. Extreme's not the right word for it. He's done more like real horror in my mind. Stephen King is a lot of thriller type horror.
Yes.
And Clive Barker is more of the, oh my god, that's horrific imagery.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of stuff.
See, this movie stuck in my head. I think I saw this in the theater, believe it or not, which is really weird that I would have seen. I mean, when did this come out? This was 1990.
1990. It was filmed in 88 or 89, after the success of when he directed his own Hellraiser movie, which made like 15 times his budget. And
so
they said, here's a check for 10 times your budget, and then it made its money but didn't make as much as they were hoping.
I was like 13 when this, and I remember seeing this in the theater, which is crazy that my parents would take me to this. But maybe it was just because it looked so weird. If you watch the trailer for it, it's just such a strange looking movie.
Well, the box art for the old VHS and it makes it look like a comedy.
It does. It looks like Little Monsters with what's his name? The kid from Wonder Years. You know,
Fred Savage.
Yeah, Fred, you know what I'm saying.
It looks like Little Monsters. It also looks like that 80s sort of spoof, Little Shop of Horrors, that sort of stuff. Like, it looks like much more of a comedy. It's not a comedy.
No, it is very far from a comedy.
I don't think there's a funny moment in the movie.
I think there's some darkly humorous parts.
They're bad, but like tongue in cheek sort of stuff. But there's not. Yeah. There's never an overt like, oh my god, this is hilarious. It's a funny horror comedy. This is like it. The basic plot we'll get into, but it's like there is a guy who's having dreams of a city or a place that is overrun or run by demons or some sort of monsters. Creatures of some sort. He's having weird dreams that are somewhat erotic, somewhat like almost like animalistic, and he's penned or picked as being the serial killer by his psychologist, played by David Cronenberg, and surprise, surprise, or you end up finding out that the serial killer is actually David Cronenberg, and he's trying to pin his murders on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And so there's that plotline, and then he basically dies a la The Crow, but doesn't die. He comes back as one of these breeds from the Nightbreed.
Yeah. They're like one of the original tribes of men. I think there's supposed to be a religious connection there with like the lost tribes of Israel or something like that.
Yeah, they say that they mentioned that there's many different tribes, and this is one of the last. Like it takes in the tribes from other. So like the reason they all look different, they all have these like some will look like traditional devil demons, some look like porcupine people, some are closer related to like a banshee or like vampiric sort of aspects to them. I guess the idea is werewolves and everything, all these different types of monsters from different lore, they're actually technically, or they were people, or they're from different tribes of offshoots of people, and that they mentioned that the current people, like the regular people that we see over the course of history, hunted them all down to basically extinction, and they've all congregated under one religion and one safe haven group.
Yeah, and it's under this cemetery that's north of Calgary or something.
Yeah,
where they're hiding. I don't know. It's really weird. And when David Cronenberg finds out about this group, he wants to go out there and I don't know, join them. He's like really interested in it.
It's hinted that he either wants to join them, or he wants to kill them, or he wants to see their power.
Yeah.
And I was reading that his role was expanded more when the studio wanted to see more of him. Apparently, they did some test screenings and it didn't quite translate as well. I guess he had Clive Barker had a harder time adapting his story to the screen than he was expecting, because I guess the whole theater of the mind doesn't always translate to visual on screen, especially when they gave him $11 million to make it, but $11 million in 1990 for the amount of costuming work they had to do was not a whole lot. They probably would have been better suited for like a $50 million budget, but then they wouldn't have made their money back.
Yeah.
At least not at that time. I know it got a lot of praise for its practical effects at the time, and you can see that some of the costuming was. Some is like, yeah, it's regular monster costumes, but some of it you're like, whoa, there's like multi-stage effects to it, things that will pulsate and move, animatronic type stuff, anything to do with like, there's a couple of them that have like tentacles, and some scenes they move pretty much as good as Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, and that's like, sure, that was CGI, but that's also like $150 million movie. So they did a pretty good job with this.
The porcupine woman stands out to me as like the peak of the costuming effects and makeup effects in this movie, just because it had to have taken forever to get that costume on her and to stay, because her like spines bristle at times.
Yeah, and they move and pulsate.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I don't know, that costume is just amazing.
And I should say, it stars Craig Sheffer, who you probably don't recognize off the top of your head if you just hear that name, but he became one of the sort of go-to direct-to-video guys in the mid to late 90s. You'd see him in a lot of action movies, and that he never quite made it big. Mm-hmm. But again, I remember him. He was in Fire in the Sky. But this was, I guess, supposed to be his breakout role, and it just didn't make a ton of money. He's good in it, and the supporting actors are pretty good. Cronenberg's character, as you sort of alluded to, is kind of hard to pinpoint what his motivations are, other than the fact that he's a serial killer with a really cool mask. Like it's like it's almost like a super tight burlap sack with buttons for eyes and a zipper mouth, almost like a gimp mask from Pulp Fiction.
Yes.
And he just goes around slashing people's throats and cutting their heads off.
Yeah, and he has like a fantastic like lair back in Calgary, like with weird, disturbing pictures on the walls
and tons of knives, and it's like he uses the idea is, it's implied that he uses his practice as a psychologist to. It's hinted at that this is not the first time he's tried to pin off his murders on somebody else, and it looks like he changes his MO depending on who he's with. So like he's a serial killer, but he'll kill a whole bunch of certain ways, and then find a way to help the police. They'll pin it on somebody else, one of his patients. And then he changes his MO and how he kills people. He loves the act of killing people. He'll change how he does it so that it's never brought on that, maybe they caught the wrong person. And then he helps them catch somebody else. So that's part of it. And he tries to gaslight the main character into believing he did it. And then the real horror starts when they go to the hospital where they're ready to detain him after they think he took a bunch of weird drugs, but the reality is I think it's just he was somehow spiritually connected to, what is the name of the town? Was it Midian, I think?
Midian.
Yeah, he has a spiritual connection to a couple of them there, and he has like a psychotic break. Well, while he's there, there's another guy in the room with them who's there for, I don't know if he's there for a psych hold as well, but he grabs a knife and starts scalping himself.
Yeah, and he succeeds.
And he just starts pulling out, and it's like, what in the ever living hell? And the hospital administration shows up and like, what'd you do to him? And he's like, I didn't do anything. And the guy's like ripping off his own head.
Yeah. And it's because that guy also knows about Midian and the Nightbreed and wants to join them.
Yeah, which is what was weird to me. It's like, at first I didn't understand because I'm like, wait, it's supposed to be these groups of marginalized, they're not human, is what they say. People like it's like tribes of people that are long extinct from like the equivalent of banshees and all these sort of things. But at the same time, a regular human can join them.
Yeah, a regular human can become them if they die
and desire it or something, and they die in a violent fashion or something.
Yeah, if they die, and then it's their deity, that big
that weird
statue
that
thing,
creepy looking. It looks like a Babylonian thing. It looks like something straight out of Conan.
Yeah, and it's down there, and it has blood, and it has like this prophecy that the main character, Aaron Boone, is going to destroy Midian. And
did you like it because he has your name?
No. I'll tell you what I loved about it, and what made it always stick in my head was the soundtrack. Again, the soundtrack is so interesting.
Yeah, well, it's Danny Elfman. When I heard this, immediately I went, are they just reusing his soundtrack from Batman Returns? It's Batman Returns with just a little bit of like horror and magical tinge to it.
But it's really good. Really, really good. And I loved the costumes of all the Nightbreed. I just thought they were impressive, really impressive.
Like, it was not the movie I thought it was going to be. Watching for sure. And like, I think I sent you a message saying, what the fuck did you make me watch?
Yeah.
Because I thought this was going to be a straightforward, either slasher or horror. Or I'm like, well, Cronenberg's in it. Maybe there's some body horror stuff. And interestingly enough, did you catch, like, he plays Dr. Decker, but his name is Philip K. Decker, Philip K. Dick.
Yeah. I got the reference.
So, I mean, it's quite clear that there are aspects of this that inspired Clive Barker from the famous sci-fi writer, obviously.
Yes.
Because I don't think that's something that Cronenberg would be like, I want to play somebody with that name. No, he probably got signed on because usually he films everything in Toronto, but apparently he did all of his scenes were in Calgary. So this must have been a case. Like, I don't know if he would have auditioned for it. This might have just been Clive Barker liking his movies and liking the style and said, hey, would you like to be in the movie?
Yeah, because it's very possible.
It doesn't have a Cronenberg-esque feel to the filming, but it does have that weirdness to it in some parts. It's weird that they chose for it to be Calgary. I'm not sure if that's where the book was originally located, but
it's urban but still rural. It's out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. There's like there's over 1 million people that live there. But yeah, you're right. But it feels like it's the middle of nowhere. It's like, what if Oregon had like 1 million people, but it was still sparse?
Yeah. And that you could just drive like a couple hours outside of town and have this completely creepy cemetery out in the middle of nowhere that has a whole city underneath it.
But then at the same time, there's like regular citizens of Midian that aren't in the cemetery but they all know about the people there and they kind of protect them.
Yeah, there's like there's the normal people that protect the Nightbreed that are kind of in the know, and like there's a gas station guy.
Yeah, like they
That's
don't
that way.
go into the cemetery because they want to eat blood and like they crave meat, as they mentioned multiple times, but they don't venture outside of their cemetery. I guess it's implied that their god tells them you don't leave the gates. If something wanders into the gates, you can eat it.
Yeah,
Um,
you're not a part of this world, kind of thing.
yeah, and there are people that keep the secrets of them alive there. So I guess the idea is it's you're supposed to maybe connect with it as, again, marginalized people. These are essentially Quakers hiding people in their town.
And there's other people that are completely unaware of the Nightbreed that live in the area, like the sheriff or whatever his name is. I mean, I shouldn't say sheriff because this is Canada. He's a Mountie.
Mountie McMurder and wants to kill everybody.
Holy crap. And I'm like, I had to keep yelling, this is Canada, when they open up the armory in the Mountie station, and it's like
he's showing off all the different type of weapons, including all the assassination like piano wire, and he's like showing off what it does, and he's like licking it because he's touching everything that he wants to. Every weapon he's like has like almost a sexual obsession with.
Yeah, and I mean, did you see the level of destruction that arsenal could wrought? I mean,
it's like they went we're talking like the RCMP. Okay, the RCMP is the ultimate power out there in that Calgary will have their own police, which is obviously what they have. They show there's Calgary police, and then there are Mounties in this. The Mounties for small towns, act as not just the federal police. They're the equivalent of the FBI in Canada. But in the rural areas outside of Ontario, like Ontario has provincial police. We're a large enough province with a large enough population that we have provincial police that handle policing in townships that don't have local police, as well as all the highway patrol. And but in most parts of Western Canada, until you get to BC, they are the federal, they are the provincial, and in many cases they are the municipal police. So they have a lot of power, but we don't have a lot of guns like that. Like if you go into their arsenal at most of their stations, they're going to have a shotgun. They're going to have, they're probably going to have like a long gun to like shoot wildlife if they have to. And they're going to have their handguns. What they're not going to have is like street sweeper shotguns and like it's not even like riot gear. It's like full on military weaponry.
Yeah, they had like a minigun in there. There's just like boxes of grenades,
a bunch of different assassin's tools,
RPGs. I mean, yeah.
yeah, you're right. Like I'm watching that going, I'm like, this is written by an American that doesn't necessarily know what the Canadian RCMP is going to have, but I'm totally okay with it. And then I keep telling myself, wait a minute, it's Alberta. They might actually have all that there.
Well, one of the things that I thought was funny when I was watching that, there's just loose grenades laying around. You see like ski poles in there, which is okay. I guess I get it. Canada, snowy, right? But then there's like right next to them are tubes for artillery rounds. Yeah. Like 100-something millimeter artillery rounds. It's why is this here? This is insane.
Well, you think that until you meet the I guess the man in charge, where he's gunning for a war.
Yeah, and he comes off as a Nazi, doesn't he?
Oh, very 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 much so. And not just that, like there's a point where near the end where the Nightbreed are rebelling, and there's an attack, and they go to kill everybody in Midian, and it doesn't go as they planned. And as some of them are trying to escape being set on fire, he turns around and he decides he's going to kill all of his own men, but he runs out of bullets. Yeah, and he doesn't just turn around and start shooting. He turns around and tells them, first of all, not to run away, and then says, "I'll kill every last one of you motherfuckers," to his own RCM, to his own people. And
Canada, folks, Canada.
Canada. Oh
Place
no,
of friendly
we should say Alberta.
Yeah, it's Alberta.
That's different. And if you ask somebody from Alberta, they'll say, yeah, Alberta's different. So like if you ask somebody from Quebec is not Canada, but it is Canada. They'll say that way too.
Okay.
So Alberta is our Wild West. So I could see somebody like that living there, maybe. Perhaps. Probably not in the RCMP.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. And I was watching, and I think I said this on like private messages, that while watching this, I can't help but connect this to the movie Final Sacrifice that was also filmed in Calgary. It's on like MST3K. It's a Canadian film that has a secret underground city outside of Calgary, and it was filmed at the same time in the same kind of location. Amazingly funny film, just because of the MST3K version of it, but weird connections between the two.
Well, the vibes I got from this, like they spent some money on the Gothic Babylonian sort of underground city they live in, and the weird imagery. I put the connection to Conan. It's more like in Conan the Destroyer. You've seen that movie? I'm assuming, right?
A long time ago, but I have. Yeah.
Okay, in that one, there is what they end up trying to find is a horn that's going to connect to their god statue that looks a little bit like almost like a Greek god.
Mm-hmm.
But when they attach it to it, it slowly turns into this demon, and it sort of melts. It's almost like the imagery from Conan mixed with like almost like Indiana Jones, like an Indian god, right? Like that's sort of the weird. It looks like their god predates Christianity, it's like a Babylonian god that they worship, and at some point the statue like kind of comes to life, and then it like there's a lot of really cool weirdness here, and it's because the original movie was called Cabal, and they changed the name because they wanted something more marketable, and it was apparently they were trying to set up that this would showcase all these different monsters, and the idea was, I guess, to create other movies based on the different types of monsters from it. So this was going to be like a hub movie that showcased all the different peoples, and you would slowly get to reveal this entire world and how it was connected. And they obviously didn't have the money and budget to do that. There was supposed to be a sequel, and that didn't come through, but apparently they are working on a TV show for the Sci-Fi Network.
Yeah, I did read that. Yeah,
and that it's in production. And I did some digging trying to find online. It is still on their production slate now. Whether or not it ends up, because Sci-Fi is part of I think NBC Universal, it might end up being a Peacock show, based on if they want to make it anything close to the subject matter and not have to cut out a lot for TV.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't. I don't see any reason why it has to be gory or incredibly violent or sexual or anything like that. All those elements are in the movie, but it doesn't have to be overly so. So I don't know.
I looked up the Final Sacrifice. That movie was made for 1,500 Canadian dollars. So they filmed it for the equivalent of a Dunkin' Donuts trip.
Yes. But Final Sacrifice cracks me up something fierce. At least the MST3K version of it.
Well, it's on VHS and Laserdisc if you're willing to track it down.
I have the MST3K version of it.
Well, if you want the uncut version without anything being put into it, you got to get the Laserdisc copy, right?
Uncut, untouched. It's like pure Colombian Coke.
When I see something that says $1,500 in a Canadian movie budget, something is telling me that they were doing it as a tax shelter for something.
I don't know. To be honest, if it's $1,500, that movie looks more than $1,500. There's enough empty beer bottles in that film to add up to $1,500.
And also at the same time, when it says budget $1,500, that might have been what they reported they put in before Telefilm Canada probably gave them like $100K or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, so getting back to Nightbreed, Nightbreed is strange.
Yeah,
the tone. And when we're not just talking the director's cut we saw, where obviously there's weird cuts that had to happen and to add the footage back in. It I can understand why maybe it didn't do so well initially. Like it made its money back and then it's some, but it was considered a financial failure because they were expecting this to break like 20 or 30 million in returns. Clive Barker didn't quite know if he wanted to make this a pure horror film or a romance movie, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't know. I would describe this movie when you're watching it to be almost dreamlike because it feels disconnected. Like scenes just feel completely disconnected from each other. The tone tends to shift. It has this kind of ethereal quality in some of the scenes, and then brutal realism in others. So yeah, it's like a weird dream all the way through it.
You know what this really feels like? Even the world underground, and this feels like an R-rated version of Neil Gaiman's Neverwhere.
Oh geez, see, I love Neverwhere. I absolutely adore that book and the old miniseries from.
Like you know what I mean? Like Midian has that sort of dreamlike. You know, like this is a world underneath the world we know that's just under the surface that we don't usually see.
Yeah.
And you can see a lot of their budget in this went into the building of the underground lair, and they blow that shit up.
Yeah,
they blow it up real good.
Yeah, there's cars crashing through ceilings. There's explosions. Yeah, I don't know. I think the majority of this movie must have gone to costuming.
By far.
I think that had to be the biggest budget because all of it is so good. I don't know. There's like the woman when she's they're in like the police station. Is it the police station or are they in the hospital? And she like turns into mist and just goes through the door, and they have like all these little touches.
I think it's the is that the hospital or is that the holding cells?
I think it's the holding cells because that's where the priest is, right? That he sees her.
Yeah, and they don't really say what the priest is there for.
Like, well, he was a drunk or something like that, and
they say he was a drunk, but it's like hinted that he's there for other reasons too.
Like, that he's not a proper Christian or something like that. And this
whatever that particularly means. Like, I'm not insinuating that like it says that like he did anything inappropriate.
Yeah, no,
but it's hinted that like he had some sort of crisis of faith, and for that he had a breakdown, and they put him in the mental ward.
Yeah, and the sheriff thought he'd be better off there because the sheriff is really disdainful of him, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And he sees like this woman just turn to mist and come through the door like a vampire, but she doesn't take her clothes with her because clothes don't turn to mist. You know. There's like
she's the one that I said was like a banshee or something.
Yeah, I always thought that she was a vampire. That's what she came off to be because like when she kissed the deputy, like there was smoke that came out of his mouth and he like fell over.
Yeah, she like sucked his soul out.
Yeah, something like that. So I always connected it with being a vampire. And that she couldn't really go out in sunlight. They had to like drive in that shaded car.
Yeah, some of them can't go out in the sun, some can. And I guess they all end up realizing that the main character is part of their prophecy, right, to bring them, I guess, into the not the promised land, but like to lead them into the future or something. And I guess what's hinted at is because he is the only one that appears that he can turn his Nightbreed power on and off. Like he can, they all sort of mutate, and they're quote unquote freaks, or they like some, even the more humanoid looking ones will have like deformities of like overly large features, or like almost like the Elephant Man sort of thing. Like they'll have like features that make them stand out, whereas his, when he gets angry or messed up, he'll have sort of lines show up on his face, and he looks like a possessed sort of demon. But then
like ritualistic scarring. That's what it looks like.
Yeah, where it'll protrude from his skin a little bit, and he gets stronger, and his hands will grow a little bit. But he, unlike all the others, can turn that off, and he looks human again.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the idea is that he's like the daywalker. He can be the one to bridge them with the humanity or something.
Yes.
One of the coolest costumes is from the costume of the character. I'm trying to look up who he was. The one that turns him into Nightbreed himself by biting him, and the bite is like what infects his body or something.
Oh, the one with all the tendrils on the back of his head?
That, yeah, and his, like, where he shakes his head around and they move, but they also look like they were animatronic, or they did something to them, because that was a really cool effect for 1990.
Yes. And I think the actor was Oliver Parker.
Oliver Parker. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Peliquin. That's what it was. Peliquin.
Yes.
That's the character.
And doesn't he have like spines that can come off his tendrils as well?
Yeah. He looks. I'm trying to picture, like, it's almost like he has tendril dreadlocks is sort of the best way to describe him.
Yes, they come off his head in like strings, basically. I don't know.
Then there was I don't remember if they gave him a name, but there's the fat guy that has two long like eyeballs on the end of like pincers that come out of his stomach, like extra arms.
Yes, and they can rip eyes out of people that are nearby.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Give me one good reason, why I shouldn't kill you. I'll give you two.
Yeah.
And these long. It looks like what was it from? What was that movie? Enemy Mine.
Oh yeah, those things.
The pit, the pit, like almost like the Sarlacc pit, but like the tentacle arms that come out of there. Mm-hmm. That's what it reminded me of, and I'm like, oh, this is creepy and crazy and awesome. And what's weird to me is the visual aesthetic of the film. If this film had a higher budget than it did, I have no idea. I can't explain necessarily why it made me think of it. This gave me a very Demolition Man feel. Maybe it's weird. The underground people or something.
Maybe.
But like, I'm watching this, and maybe it's just the time period. It could also be that they maybe used the same cameras, because I remember watching at the end, and they didn't use like the standard ARRI Alexa stuff, or like they used some other camera stuff. And maybe it's because it was filmed in Canada, we used different cinematography equipment or something. But this has a very distinct look to it too.
Mm-hmm.
Music-wise, we already talked about that. It's one of the best unknown soundtracks for sure.
Yeah, I had it on audio cassette at one point, this soundtrack. I probably still do. I just have to look for it.
And the best way to describe it is, if you liked Batman Returns, it's Batman Returns, almost identical, because this is what he did right before Batman Returns.
Yes.
And with a bit of, if you could picture, what if Batman's music had a little bit of a dark carnival, black magic, gypsy sort of feel to it.
I can see that.
Because that's what I got from it, and I went, oh man, now I got to track down the soundtrack, because every time it was playing like an action scene, especially the opening scene where it becomes very clear it's Danny Elfman, even before they say it's Danny Elfman. Mm-hmm. It almost sounds like he used the exact same orchestra that he did for the Batman movies.
It's very possible. I'm trying to see if the soundtrack is available.
The question is, for $11 million, how much of that do you think went to Danny Elfman? being that like he had just made the Batman soundtrack a year earlier.
Wow. I have no idea. There's samples of it up on YouTube that you can
definitely
listen to.
Because like it's the highlight of it. It's the soundtrack for a movie that should have cost 10 times what this movie did.
Oh, absolutely.
And I saw read a bunch of things about how he's actually very proud of the soundtrack, and it's one of those things where, sometimes these composers will make music for a movie that ends up flopping, and it's kind of disappointing because a lot of people won't get to hear their work. Mm-hmm. But this is one that you're going to want to check out just for the music alone, even. It elevates what would have been, like, this is already a messy film with the edits that had to happen to it. It's a very interesting film, but the music elevates it to another level for sure. And Cronenberg's character gets killed, but then doesn't die.
Well, it depends on which cut that you watch. Like the cut that I remember watching as a kid, the priest brings him back to life. In the director's cut, that doesn't happen. He does just die. Yeah,
he dies, and the sheriff comes after. Well, what happens is the priest becomes obsessed with their Babylonian style god, And he, towards the end of the film, he wants to help the Nightbreed because he sees everybody as God's children, but then he sees their God and realizes that unlike the Christian God, he sees a tangible God that they have. Like they're not just worship. He sees what they're worshiping. He thinks initially that it's like, oh, they're worshiping, a false idol. It's a statue, but he sees the statue come to life.
Yeah, it's a physical being that's actually there.
Yeah. They're in some other world or the afterlife, but also tied directly to the statue and to Midian itself. He sees it. He becomes obsessed. He sees what is it like they have their cauldron that is used as like, I guess, where they see the future or
it's like the blood of their god that's in there. It's what they actually use to purposely turn people into Nightbreed.
Yeah, and he gets close to it, wants to touch it, and the god statue, as the whole place is coming apart around them, comes to life, stares at him, and flips up the bowl at him, splashing his face with it, and it starts melting all of his hair out. So he ends up with a receding hairline that starts at the back of his ears.
Yeah,
and it ends up mutating his head and enlarging, making his brain larger. And at the very end, you realize that he's now obsessed. He's going to go. He wants to kill all of them. He says to the sheriff that finds him, "I saw their god, and their god hurt me, and now I'm going to kill all of them." And the sheriff says, "I want to come with you," and instead he kills the sheriff and leaves him on the altar with Cronenberg's dead body.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And again, in the other version, I guess Cronenberg comes back.
Yeah, he's brought back with the same kind of god blood by the priest.
And then we cut to a scene where the I guess the lost tribe of Israel is in a barn, the survivors, and they're saying, what are we going to do? They're like, Cabal will come to us, and Cabal will save us. And he turns his girlfriend because she decides to kill herself, Romeo and Juliet style, if they can't be together. Mm-hmm. He turns her, and it ends with because he and she, I guess, are daywalkers, they're going to find them the promised land.
Yes, and they're going to find the new place for them to all live, wherever that may be, probably further, deeper into the wilderness of Alberta. But yeah.
And then we're led into believe that the sequel will be that they're being hunted.
Most likely. I mean, there was a pretty big death toll for that last battle. I mean,
and I just realized that their god is Baphomet. So it is a Babylonian sort of semi-Christian demon.
Yes. Really, it's a really weird movie. Like, the best way I can say if you'll like it or not is, if you want to watch it, do so for the visuals and the sound of it. The plot is really choppy, messed up, weird, but
the mythos is there.
Yeah, the mythos is there. Yeah,
and there you're going to probably be intrigued to try to find out more. And I think there's probably more books related to it, but if anything, this will probably make you want to read the book.
Yes,
because from what I hear, it was so good that Hellraiser they didn't think was going to make money, and it ended up making like 10 times or 20 times its budget. So that's when he got a deal with Clive Barker got a deal with Morgan Creek to make 3 movies. I think they only made the one on that deal because this didn't make it made money. It made multiple millions, but it didn't make like I guess the predetermined amount they wanted. But he didn't come to them with the idea to make this film. They said, "We want you to adapt this book of yours." So obviously somebody at Morgan Creek read it and thought it was a really great idea to build there. And I know that when they did start making it, Clive Barker said that he was trying to make this the Star Wars of horror films. And I guess the idea was to build the world, like to have this giant franchise. And the problem was, I think he just didn't know how to grasp how to build that. Like, it's almost like, should they have even had Craig Sheffer's character, or should this have been an establishing movie where you're just establishing Midian?
I would have said that you should probably just do Midian first, like the story of how they all got there.
Yeah,
Um,
you could have them be humanoid, or have you follow a couple of the characters. You could have done it in a style where you follow 3 or 4 characters on their own paths and how they all end up at Midian, and just how the creation of that society, and then you could have even done that for like half the movie, and then had the second half of the movie be about uh, uh, the Boone character.
Cabal finally coming in.
But instead they started out with the slasher aspect, which I think is what all they marketed in all the posters. Because this is a case of the movie is nothing like the marketing.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any really good way of actually marketing this movie the way it is without how it's been chopped up. Like, yeah, what is it? You've already mentioned that before. Like, what is this movie? It's an art piece. That's all it is. It's an art piece.
And I looked the character. He's not actually a Mountie. The bad police officer. He's actually just a regular police captain, I guess, with Calgary.
I mean,
I thought he was the Mountie because he had Mountie stuff. This might just be a case of Clive Barker not knowing the difference between what a Mountie is and what a police officer is in Canada.
I mean, yeah, I probably don't. I probably don't know, but
it's like to me, the police in this behaved as if they were state troopers.
If they were in America, that's what I would have said. That this is either some podunk sheriff's office, like county sheriff, or it's a renegade kind of state cop.
Because it's weird. They do have parts of the movie that are in like the Calgary police, like it's clearly Calgary police, but then they have parts where they call them the Mounties, but they all appear to be the same organization in for the sake of the movie. So it's fun and interesting to watch. But they seem to be mixing a bunch of stuff. But you're right. Like this, he does come across as clearly a Nazi.
Yeah, he's preparing for the race war and is really happy to get it when he's really, like, I'm going to go kill those guys that
really
are
happy
different.
to get it. And anybody that runs away, you're a traitor against your race. So he's going to kill them. Honestly, very good movie. In the interesting, it's not a cohesive movie.
No,
but it is an interesting movie to watch. I would have figured by now I would have seen it, or at least put it in my collection, because at one point I was collecting all the Cronenberg films, but I guess I just didn't because it wasn't a movie he directed. He does a serviceable job in this, but he's not going to blow anybody away because he's not a classically trained actor. But I would say all of the actors in this did a pretty good job. It is this film that's sort of halfway between an independent, low-budget film and a Hollywood production, because it was a Hollywood production. But that $11 million went a lot farther because they filmed half of it in England and half of it in Canada. Mm-hmm. I believe, I think Pinewood Studios in England is where they filmed all of or most of the Midian scenes. Mm-hmm. But then all the regular outdoor stuff and hospital stuff and police station stuff, that was all done in Calgary. Okay. So it's kind of weird, but like it's the kind of case where $11 million really would have been $30 million if you filmed it in the States. Yeah. So they were able to sneak by on a lower budget than expected. Worth watching. I don't know if you have any other final thoughts, because it sounds like you've got a bigger history with it. For me, this was a real, like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it is. Well, it's true that this movie is a what the fuck. It is so weird. It is so disjointed that it's like I said, it's like a strange dream. But it's so visually striking at times, and audibly the music and the sound effects are really kind of worm their way into your head. It's fantastic. Like I said, I bought the soundtrack to this on cassette. I remember listening to this in my car on dates, even as a teenager. And they're like, what the
Daddy Elfman for your date.
Well, yeah, I mean, hey, if you want to have some, like,
fun times.
Yeah, it works.
Well, all you have to do was turn to the lucky lady and say, I'm Batman.
I am Batman. Well, you know, when you're just driving down the street and you want to talk and you don't want to have to like yell over lyrics or anything like that, it's kind of like, hey, this is just, it's mood music, and we're gonna go watch a different movie, and here's this weird Clive Barker movie.
Oh yeah.
It's so strange. It's just very strange. So yeah, I do recommend it, but I will not say that you will automatically like it, because I don't see many people enjoying this film to watch it multiple times, whereas the only reason I do is because it is so weird. And not in a bad way.
Absolutely. I don't know what else there is to say about it, except it's worth a watch. I'm not sure where it's streaming, but it's available on Blu-ray pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. You can just order it.
So I think that's going to do it for our discussion on these two. So do we have an idea? I think I had an idea of a few things we can watch later. I do want to pick up on maybe another Rutger Hauer movie or two, because we had a lot of fun watching Blind Fury.
Blind Fury was great.
So maybe I'll see about if we can get a hold of Wanted Dead or Alive, which is surprisingly a sequel to the I think was it 50s or early 60s show. I think it's 50s show with Steve McQueen.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think the connection is it's like Steve McQueen's supposed to be his grandfather, or something to that extent. And then maybe we'll do something there. We had fun doing the Jackie Chan American films. Maybe we'll find some more, oddball things like that from actors that we weren't expecting. I'll have to go through what we've got in our library to watch, but something quick that you and I can check out that maybe have a theme like this, either connected by title or connected by theme. And maybe we'll do an episode or two of that before Mike is back with us and we can get back into the swing of things as far as the regular episodes go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep an eye out. I know I picked up a few more 80s films recently on Blu-ray that I was shocked that I didn't own on Blu-ray already. But
yeah, and it's the time of year where we start getting more stuff too. I know that I contacted Vinegar Syndrome and I said, hey, do you have any idea if there's anything coming our way? Because we put in some requests for things, and I got an email back about 10 minutes later. Usually they take a bit longer because they're very busy there. But they sent me a message saying, hey, you've got a box in the mail as of last week. So sometime it's going to show up, and I'm not sure what's going to come necessarily, but there's a lot of B movies and strange things that they've got putting out. Like one thing I noticed that showed up on their list of things that is coming in the future is they're putting out a Blu-ray or 4K Blu-ray set plus Blu-rays of Scanner Cop, which is the third and fourth Scanners movies.
Ooh.
That were kind of like the first one being the big David Cronenberg seminal hit that pretty much launched his career in the States. Because
sure, I've seen that. I've even seen that.
Yeah. I was going to say, prior to that, his 3 or 4 films have basically only been in Canada and the UK, and then like some art house circles. But Scanners was the first moderately budget film that he did. Introduced a lot of people to Michael Ironside, because prior to that, I think he'd only done Canadian TV and movies, and has that really famous scene where the dude's head blows up.
Yep, everyone remembers that.
Everybody remembers that, and in fact, to the point where it was like referenced in Wayne's World, when there's the part where Wayne walks off, decides not to do the show anymore when Rob Lowe decides to be a dick to him, and they leave Garth on screen by himself, and then and it starts playing the creepy music, and one of the production crew turns to Rob Lowe and says, "You ever see that scene in Scanners when the dude's head blew up?" And then they cut to Garth, and it's like the exact same look of the other guy right before his head blew. So they made sequels, 2 of them, like Scanners 2 and 3 were, I think, Canadian direct-to-video movies. A lot of Canadian actors in it that became famous later on. But they were nothing special as far as I remember. They were just like, nothing to the same cerebral or gory levels of the original. And then they made Scanner Cop 1 and 2, which is connected only in the sense of, hey, there's that same drug in these people that was given to their like the idea was, it was like what was that drug that mothers had that ended up having children were born with defects in the 50s.
Thalidomide.
Thalidomide. There
God,
is
that's
some
weird. I know that.
there. I only know it because of Scanners and because I've watched Call the Midwife, which is the British show about midwifery in the 1950s and 60s,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds super sissy, but it's a super awesome, entertaining show. Anyway, that was the idea, is that drug gave the kids powers. Well, that's the only thing connecting the films. It's just literally about a police officer that has those powers in Scanner Cop 1 and 2, but they're over the top, like ridiculous direct-to-video action violence. Well, they're putting that stuff out. So that might be something we look at down the line. But there is a lot of weird stuff that I'm happy to say is like between Vinegar Syndrome working for themselves and other companies and other people like Shout Factory, pretty much any weird 70s and 80s and early 90s movie that you could think of that maybe only had a VHS release, they're all finally getting Blu-ray releases. And I don't think we're ever going to run out of things to watch here.
No. There's one that I've been talking with Darlene about. Like, I don't think that will fit in our Earth versus Soup podcast.
Oh yeah,
but it might fit here, and that's Stalker, an old Soviet sci-fi film.
You know what? Maybe not a bad idea.
Because it's a seminal piece that actually influenced a lot of later films, even in the U.S.
And well, for the next two films, I know what we're going to talk about. I can say it now because it took me a while to source copies, because in one case, there isn't a home video release, and it's been sort of dead forever, except for reruns, and you can find clips on YouTube. We're going to do two Canadian films. The idea was inspired by Earth vs. Soup, where you're like, all those films of the 50s and 60s, the B movies. Canada didn't really have that. You had a few American movies that were maybe made here. Our film industry is very tied to David Cronenberg, in that he and a couple people really campaigned to get Telefilm Canada started. Like, the whole idea of public financing for films is what made our industry. Because prior to that, it was documentaries or French Canadian cinema. And let's be honest, we're not all sitting through French Canadian cinema. But the English speaking genre film you can be tied to him in like 1969 getting funding. Well, in the 70s, we had a few productions pop up. One prominent one that was a big rerun fare for years and years is called Starship Invasions.
Okay.
So we're going to cover that. That's the one that I had a hard time finding a copy of that was watchable, because people all had like VHS rips from the 1980s on there. It's a movie from 1977, completely Canadian funded. We're talking low, like $1 million, but we're talking ridiculously low budget looking, starring Robert Vaughn. Like, we got other actors. Robert Vaughn, Christopher Lee.
Okay.
And it is something you would have figured would have been black and white and right out of 1954.
Okay.
Like, we're talking low budget.
Okay.
So I figured we could watch it. That might be something. I'll send you a copy because it was available on YouTube. Something that you and Darlene can watch, and then we whether she pops on to talk with me about it with you, or we talk about it on here, it will be worth it. I found some other films in the 70s, but I found out a lot of them were co-financed. But the one that wasn't, that was considered a high budget release at the time, was The Shape of Things to Come. Now, there was a movie in the 30s that was, I think, American or UK. But based on H.G. Wells, I think that was a book or
Yes.
short story. But yeah, there's the 1979 movie, H.G. Wells' The Shape of Things to Come. Purely Canadian. Might have had distribution in the States eventually. I don't know what the budget is on it, but it stars Jack Palance, Barry Morse, Nicholas Campbell, who Canadians will know from tons of TV and movies. Probably one of the more famous Canadian character actors and leading men. And you'll know him when you see him, but like, because he's been in American movies, but he was much bigger here. This is a young version of him. This was Canada's answer to Star Wars, and Space 1999 and Battlestar Galactica, that most people haven't seen, but had a higher budget. So, and right after 1979 is when you'll see our industry exploded. because of Canadian directors and people started to get Canadians that started to get work in the States, like James Cameron and all that. So like the 80s is where our industry exploded, but like this was sort of the signal to when that happened. So those two, I figure, back to back, two Canadian films that encompass the style of the 1950s and 60s B movie.
Okay.
So I'll send that stuff your way, so you can check them out. They are not, for the most part, not easy to find.
Okay, I'll be interested in watching them.
So yeah, that's I think where we're going to go with our next episode, and then we'll see where we go from there. So that is going to do it, I think, for our show this week. Unless you have anything else to add to the end here, I think they're both worth watching for very different reasons. And
Yeah.
I'm happy you maybe watched this weirdness. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I'm just, hey, if you like weird films, these two are it. They're both memorable for very different reasons, though.
Very much so. So, for This Week in Geek, we have been Aaron and Alex. We're going to sign off and be back next time with some weird Canadian 70s sci-fi films.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember, lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.